Yeah, and we're live, everyone.
Nice.
So, it's holiday time, right?
Yeah, it's that time of year. Oh
Holiday
man, we
time.
got 5 people joining
Already,
already.
yeah.
Because I remember
Pressure.
last time we had 0 for about the first 20 minutes, so we are hot today.
That's right. That's right. Before we really get into it, I guess, have you been watching any of the World Cup? Oh, you can also raise the volume in the soundboard. It's a little low.
Okay, yeah, let me take a look here. If I do it to say here, how do you feel about say this?
That's pretty good. I think that's
Okay, cool. I don't want it to be too quiet. The
good. Yeah,
sounds are
yeah,
important.
or too loud, or too loud.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But no, thanks everyone for joining. Oh, now we're at 0.
Whatever.
But anyway, yeah. So, have you been watching any of the World Cup or anything like that?
I'll be honest. I'll be the person throughout this podcast, throughout the life of this podcast, that is at this point, I'm not anti-sports anymore like I was like 10 years ago, but
Oh
I'm
wow,
definitely
okay.
don't really care that much. I mean, even when it comes to like the nationalism angle or like revenge for colonialism angle, I mean, it's kind of fun, but I mean, it would force me to pay attention to things I otherwise wouldn't. So,
Well, thank you, Teen. You can't be at
teens
0.
here.
Teen's here.
Nice.
All right, awesome, awesome.
But yeah, what about you? I mean, it sounds like you have if you asked.
I'm super into it. So we won't get, but so I'm just very excited. It was Argentina moved through today, and tomorrow is going to be France versus who are they playing? I gotta look it up. Morocco. How could I forget?
Okay.
And I'm hoping Morocco wins because it would just be amazing. But anyway, what we wanted to talk about today was, I think it was in the news about a couple of months ago.
Yep.
And one of the Plan A patrons actually DM'd me, humble rage.
Okay.
Thanks for letting us know that there was an update on this. Where what we're talking about is that I think back in like August, a group of Danish adoptees, they submitted applications, so they submitted a petition, and I can put this up actually.
Oh yeah, I forget we have the advanced features of StreamYard available to us.
We'll put this up. Yes, here we go. So I'm going to zoom in so we can read this. But this group of Danish adoptees petitioned the Korean government, South Korean government, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Seoul, because they want to have the Korean government investigate their adoptions. And the Danish adoptees are, they're asserting that there were widespread practices that falsified or obscured their origins, right?
Mhm.
And this wasn't surprising to me. Was this surprising to you, Kyle? I mean, it wasn't surprising to me that these accusations were made.
Oh no, absolutely
at
not.
all.
I would say a majority of adoptees that I know who have looked into a birth family search have encountered these issues with inconsistent information that varied depending on where they were looking, or just finding out that records were completely falsified. So
Right.
it's good to see that it's become, I guess, enough of an organized effort for it to be formally looked into. Whereas before, it's sort of like something that we knew was kind of going on behind the scenes all along. But it sounds like this is the first time, or at least to this level of depth, that they're looking into it to see what exactly is going on.
Yeah, exactly. So this guy Peter Muller, who's an attorney, I guess in the Netherlands, right? Netherlands is Danish. No, they're
Denmark.
Dutch. Denmark, Danish.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
Yeah. So in Denmark, so he's the co-head of the Danish Korean Rights Group, and I think from what I read from another interview, this was only put together fairly recently.
Yeah, I believe it
This
was
group.
within the last year or so.
Yeah.
At least that the formal request was being put together.
Right. And they very quickly in this. It doesn't seem quick, like a year. It took like a year, but in the time scale of these types of things, that's actually pretty fast. Especially
Absolutely.
since you're getting together, 50, 60, 70, however many adoptees to sort of, or just people in general to sort of coordinate, right? So this took a lot of doing. And so in August of this year, August 23rd, they submitted the and so in August they submitted the application, and then the Truth and Reconciliation Commission decided that they were going to actually investigate, and they had up to 4 months from August to decide whether they were going to actually investigate. So in August, the Danish Korean rights group submitted their application, and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission had 4 months to decide whether they were actually going to do these investigations. And I can share another screen. So I will share another one. So in December, on December 7th, like last week,
about 6 days ago,
they just that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission decided they were going to investigate some of the applications. So it was not all of the 53. I think it's only a dozen or a couple dozen of them. So that Thursday's decision opens what could be South Korea's most far-reaching inquiry into foreign adoptions. And this is something I've talked about before, that it's up to or about 200,000 South Koreans were adopted overseas, right? From starting from the 50s, right after the Korean War ended, all the way up until, I guess, the heyday of the 80s, but it's still going on, actually. So like a couple dozen every year still, up to today. And they're going to do 34. And these are adoptees that were sent to Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, and the US from the 1960s all the way to the 1990s. So this isn't something where like these bad practices were going on just sort of like after close to when the Korean War ended, like all the way up until like the 1990s. So pretty recent, right? I mean, and the adoptees who were born in the 90s, they're in their 30s now, right?
Yeah, give or take.
So it's 34 out of the 51. And the applications filed by that group have since grown to more than 300. And even more and dozens are going to file that application on Friday. So that was by the 9th. That was last Friday, which was the deadline for the investigation requests. The application cite a broad range of grievances that allege carelessness, and a lack of due diligence in the removal of scores of children from their families amid loose government monitoring. And it wasn't just loose government monitoring, right? I mean, it was almost the government had laws in place that basically gave an incredible amount of power and like basically allowed these private agencies to have custody of these children, right? And
it's my understanding that passed in the 70s, and that's when adoptions really started to ramp up into the 80s and 90s, was because of the change in the special adoption law at the time, which I guess granted the heads of these agencies guardianship rights and the ability to place these children with foreign parents without supervision from courts. So it made it a lot easier to take custody of the children and place them internationally. And that sort of brings us to where we are today.
Right, because because they could just act completely, they just had complete control. And if they just lied, they could just basically do that.
Makes it easy.
Right. It's during much of the period in question, the country was ruled by a succession of military leaders who saw adoption as a way to deepen ties with the democratic West. Right. So I think while reducing the number of mouths to feed and removing the socially undesirable, including children of unwed mothers and
The
orphans.
socially undesirable.
So I mean, we'll talk about this, but like in the context of these sort of reasons that are given in the article, I think ideas like reducing the number of mouths to feed, removing the socially undesirable, those ideas are, I would say, the first things that would come to mind as reasons, right? They're like, oh, the country was poor, so they needed to, they couldn't feed all the mouths, so what are they going to do with them? So they adopted them out, right?
Naturally.
So yeah, just as everyone does. But what I think is not talked about enough is sort of this reason to deepen ties with the democratic West.
Right? I laughed when I saw that. I mean, I'm used to things being framed in that way, but that's a euphemism. I mean, if you really look into the history of the Korean War and that conflict and the interventionism and meddling from the West really explains that deep down, South Korea is a vassal state. It's been under the control of the US military and US government for decades. And the ability to just pluck children from this environment is reflective of that power dynamic.
Yeah. And I think it also just it's uncomfortable to think about from a Western perspective, and also probably from a Korean perspective, that there was this exchange set up, or there are these channels created to allow children to go from Korea to America, and because there was a desire from the West for these children, right, to do good, right, to be charitable, and there must have been a sense, or at least a thought, that if we don't allow this, or if we don't sort of make this as easy as possible, maybe they would lose favor with like certain people, in the governments of those of America or other, in European countries.
Absolutely.
And and then as it started going, right, as it started growing, right, because Holt was there and like somehow convincing families to give him the children, and then like getting on a plane and flying back. And sometimes the Korean government knew, sometimes they didn't, like, but he just sort of was doing this. And then it got more formal, and it started growing. The money got bigger, right? The volume of the number of children started getting bigger. And then at the point where anyone was sort of like, what the hell is going on, there was too much tied up in it, right? And
it
also,
was already going. It was too late to stop the presses on that.
Right. So like, I just there's just a lot more I need to read up on this as well, and sort of like this angle of how adoption and sort of the flow of children around the world, not in the like child trafficking sense, not in the child trafficking sense that people think of like super like dark, in the shadows type of child movement, but like deemed legal, right? How that
allowed
sort
by
of
law, out in the open.
Even
if the results are the same as what would be dark and hidden and clandestine,
right? But this is sort of like seen as legitimate, right? I just want I wonder, you know, and I'm sure there's some scholarship about this, but like I wonder sort of how that relates to sort of how these nations sort of make these bonds together, right? And um, but it's just it's like a phrase in passing in an article.
Yeah,
But it
I
doesn't.
mean,
No one, no, you know, they don't really talk about it, right? They're just like, oh yeah, this is one of the reasons that uh, it continued to happen, or it happened, or like continue to happen.
yeah, because when I
Um,
think of leaders, military dictators like Syngman Rhee or Syngman Rhee, uh, and just thinking of their legacy of violence and people protesting against them, I guess it makes me raise the question of, just to give this some context, who put these people in power? Who encouraged this? And
mhm.
when you have a phrase like wanting to increase diplomatic ties or framing it in that way, I think it really erases a lot of the violence that came along in that process.
Yeah,
Leaders were ousted, uh, various communists and Marxists were killed just because of their political ideology. And the people that they were replaced with, regardless of how violent or repressive they were, as long as they were following along with US interests, they were allowed to do as they wanted.
yeah,
Um,
pretty much.
yeah, so I need to do more research myself, but I need to get a better sense of how much of it was pressure from a powerful entity like the United States and their desires and demands versus how much of it was crooked profit motive or just under the table sort of dealings.
Or all of it,
Um,
right?
yeah,
Or all
I
of
need to get
that.
a better sense of like the percentages, but a
Yeah,
lot of forces were at play, and it's so much more complicated than deepening ties with the Democratic West. So
yeah,
it's just interesting to see it here.
it, definitely. And but like, you know, I think we mentioned this before, but like uh, China for a while was sort of the replacement country in Asia, at least.
Yep.
Um, but now, you know, but they've changed their policy. So the baby supply from China has slowed to a trickle as well. And then during COVID, they basically just shut the door.
Yeah.
And there was tons and tons of coverage about that, and um, you know, people going to their congressmen and things like that. So I could see that playing. You know, that I think that relates to sort of how, you know, it might have happened with Korea as well. It's like there's a lot of pressure from, you know, domestic American politicians, um, you know, to the State Department, all that. It's something that we need to discuss further. I need to do a lot more research before we really spend too much more time on it. But I just, again, like, deepening ties with the Democratic West, a lot in that phrase.
Yeah, that's doing a lot of lifting.
Yeah, yeah. But just moving on here. So like most of the South Korean adoptees sent abroad were registered by agencies as legal orphans, okay, found abandoned on the streets, a designation that made the adoption process quicker and easier. But many of the so-called orphans had relatives who could easily be identified and found. And this is very common. I mean, this isn't just something that happened in Korea. Like if you read you know, the books like the Child Catchers, and you read up about um you know, just more recent sort of huge adoption events, or things like that, like in Haiti and things like that, right?
Yeah, Haiti,
After
Ethiopia.
the after the hurricanes and
Yep.
things like you know, those events, there's just a flood of adoptions to America and other Western countries, and it's always that, oh, they're
Oh,
orphans, but
my
no,
phone's ringing.
they're
I should have
often
silenced that.
they're not, huh?
My phone was ringing. I should have
Oh,
silenced
no
that, but it's
worries.
okay.
So this is not surprising, right? Um, some of the adoptees say they discovered that the agencies had switched their identities to replace other children
Yeah,
who
it's wild.
died or got too sick to travel, which often made it impossible to trace their roots. Isn't that insane?
I mean, you'd think that if this was an ethical practice that had been formalized that if you lost the paperwork or a child was too sick to travel, you would wait until they're okay to travel and send them with the correct paperwork, or make sure the paperwork that's sent with the child is correct. Like the very basics of rigor were not followed through on here.
Here's what I think the motivation was to sort of switch children out if the originally intended one got too sick. The fear is that they lied about the relative health or you know the status of the child to begin with to the prospective parents, and
Mhm.
then they're afraid that if they tell the parents that, oh, this child's sick, that they're not going to want to adopt the child after all, and then
And then
they're
they're not going to pay that money.
right, exactly. So, and because of that period, right, the 70s to the 90s, I
Yep.
don't think even up until the 90s there was a requirement that you had to go to Korea, meet the child. There probably wasn't a lot of photographs exchanged, and I think a lot of prospective adoptive parents, if they're in that era, uh, even if they were like, oh, this child doesn't look quite like the one I got photos of, um, they didn't necessarily care, or they would make up some rationalization, right? So I think the motivation was just like, you got to keep the transaction flowing,
Yep.
and you can't be honest about the health of the child. So you got to lie, and you can't delay the timeline. So you just the kid's got
No,
to be on the
yeah,
plane.
I think that's really it. I mean, if you're taking this institution of uh, taking children from their families and placing them overseas with customers in the United States, you're going to treat it more like a business transaction. And in a business transaction, the expectation is to have that go as smoothly as possible, going from the source to the customer. And I think that's the
Pretty much.
mindset that really took hold when it came to, hey, we might not have the right kid, but here's a kid. Let's not
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah. Here's a kid, roughly the same age,
Yeah,
same gender. There you go.
same ethnicity, good enough.
Yeah. Um, the adoptees called for the commission to broadly investigate agencies for record falsification, which just happened all the time, and manipulation, and for allegedly proceeding with adoptions without the proper consent of birth parents.
And that's another thing that I kind of like to put into context when I really think about it. I mean, the idea that if you don't know a detail about, say, a child's parents, their background, where they're originally from, or the circumstances of why they were given up, uh, if it were me, a rational, uh, mostly honest person, I would be like, unknown. We don't know. But instead, they just put shit in just to fill it out. I just can't imagine the perspective of an individual actually completing that paperwork to be used for reference to just say, well, I'll just fucking make something up.
Right.
Like to put myself in that position, it's mind boggling to me.
And
Like
I
you're,
think and look, this says about without the allegedly proceeding without the adoption with adoption without the proper consent of birth parents. I
yeah,
think this falsification manipulation is to make them an orphan,
yep,
so they can proceed without the consent of birth parents. Because
yep.
this is something I didn't know before. I've known it for many years now, but before I started really thinking about this, um, what I didn't realize happened, or in a lot of other countries, these orphanages, or they had these group homes for children that um who where it was sort of seen as normal because these countries are so poor, and so many families are like live in like real poverty,
Yeah.
but they have a lot of children too. Is that it was sort of seen as normal, and a lot of these like orphanages, or there were these homes that would provide a service really where um like they were funded either by charity or by the government, where it was seen as normal, where some families would like place some of the kids that they couldn't take care of, with the understanding that like these kids should get fed and like maybe
Yeah.
an education. But then and they could visit, right? So it's not like they're just like completely isolated from their children. That they can visit and everything like that, but you're not legally separated from them. Like you're
Yep.
still their parent, right? And so they there was some of that understanding, but then these agencies were different from the traditional ones, right? So then they would place their kids into these organizations or these homes with the assumption, and they weren't disabused of that assumption, or sometimes lied to, right?
Yep.
Told, oh yeah, this is an arrangement.
We'll take care of them,
Right,
and
we'll
we'll have
take
them
care
ready
of 'em,
for you
and
when you're
right.
over your hardships.
Right, but they lied, and they
lied,
and the kids would be gone when they would come back a few years later.
Yeah, we don't have them anymore. What are you talking about?
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy to hear about that.
And that happens a lot. That happened a lot, I think.
Yep.
And I read that that happened a lot, or that's happened in many other countries too.
Absolutely.
So like, I mean, I don't know how you could do that. I don't know how you could work and do that. I don't know what kind of person you have to be to do something like that.
It really takes advantage of people's positive assumptions about the institution of international adoption, in terms of there being multiple bad actors that take away a child from their parents, deceive parents into giving their kids up, or falsifying paperwork. We just assume naturally that if adoption has been around for so long, that these things don't happen, and therefore we don't really need to look at this critically because the intention of the institution itself is good. But then when you look deeper, you find that things like this happened regularly, with a very large portion of adoptions.
Yeah.
To where if you really dig into the history of adoption and its practices at an international level, you say to yourself, how did this even start as a practice if it's been this crooked with this many bad actors all along?
Yeah.
And that's something that, I didn't really know about until I started to look into this more critically.
Right.
I needed to honestly acknowledge these feelings of alienation or discomfort that started to make me feel a little bit critical toward adoption for me to really come to that conclusion. But if you don't have the sort of emotional support to get to that point, you don't really think about adoption in those terms. So it's interesting to really think about as someone that's had permission to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. Quickly, thanks E for joining from Twitter. Awesome. Interesting Twitter handle.
Hey, I love this guy.
Appreciate
we talk
it,
about Salo a lot, so that's the official film of this podcast. Salo or 120 Days of Sodom. Shout out to that movie. Shout out to Pasolini.
And then they want the commission to establish whether the government was responsible for the corrupt practices, and whether adoptions were fueled by increasingly large payments and donations from adoptive parents, which apparently motivated agencies to create their own supply. Right. And that's one of the big issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
This perverse incentive that's set up when where children are being moved around, right?
Yeah, and I mean,
probably not the best thing to do.
If these incentives themselves exist because of the way that this practice is carried out, then the practice itself is not centered around the well-being and health of the children.
Exactly.
These economic incentives are created through who is this targeted toward? Who's the market customer for this? And if it's going to be the adoptive parents and serving their wants or desires, then there's going to be just shady and strange practices that allow for this practice to continue for those customers. So
yeah,
it's an important issue of framing.
So I'm really hoping that this Truth and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission does an honest and thorough job. Um, this is not an easy thing for any nation or any organization to have to do this very potentially self-incriminating type of investigation. Um, but I guess to get away from this for just this story for a little bit,
Mhm.
um, you know, I guess like so, what would you want the Korean government to do better in the future, or like what types of programs, or like what would you want the government to do?
So we kind of discussed this a little bit beforehand,
Yeah.
and I think the examples that you gave were really good. So because you asked me first, I'm going to take your ideas and then build off that, and we'll see where
Sure,
it
let's do
goes.
it. Yeah.
But I do think that holding the organizations accountable that started this practice, that kept it going, that built up the infrastructure around it, need to be held accountable and punished accordingly. Because at the end of the day, when I think about these moral panics about child safety, or children's emotional well-being, you hear about panics like not wanting to have drag queens and trans people around children type shit. But this is the kind of shit that is actually causing the sorts of emotional harm that people are having moral panics about, but no one's really talking about because the intentions of the institution itself are considered good because
Yeah.
they're coming from religious organizations. They're coming from people with white savior complexes that come from these uh, advantaged economic positions to be able to take these children away from their families. So it needs to be honestly reckoned with. The facts need to be found, and then the parties that were responsible for this institution need to be punished and held accountable and shamed for the rest of eternity.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the adoptive agencies end, I think that's where I'd focus. But in terms of the adoptees and
Yeah.
making things
Yeah.
whole for them and just reconciling with the reality of what international adoption is, yeah, financial assistance to adoptees to do birth family searches and to learn the Korean language and learn more about the culture, to travel there, to possibly be subsidized to live there in some sort of immersive experience. And I think to kind of tie those ideas together, and this is based on my own personal experiences too, I think there should be formal government infrastructure that hires adoptees and hires native Korean people who are sympathetic to the
Yeah.
struggles and
Yeah.
experiences of adoptees to facilitate the cultural education and birth family searches. And this is coming from my experiences with summer camps, my experiences with adoptee centered organizations like Coroot, which is
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the I guess adoptee centered hostel that's in Seoul, headed by someone named Doyeon Kim. So shout out to him. He's one of the few pastors that doesn't
Yeah.
believe in the baby drop boxes and prefers that we do everything that we can to keep children with their families. And through those experiences of meeting other people in similar circumstances, there's something very liberating about feeling alienated your whole life and then entering a space where people just kind of understand each other because of those shared experiences. So, and same thing with summer camps where I attended with Korean Americans and Korean adoptees too. The idea that we have this well funded and well promoted centralized effort to facilitate long term relationships among adoptees with native Koreans that care about their experiences and to facilitate the birth family searches and the cultural learning. So I'd say those are the four major things. Maybe one last thing now that I'm kind of taking a look. Uh, Possibly a clear path to citizenship in Korea as well. I know that there is
Yes.
a path to citizenship for Korean adoptees and people otherwise born in Korea, or if a family member is Korean, something of that sort. But the fact that I can't really name the specific tenets of how that works is reflective of if there's a clearer way to make that happen, some sort of retroactive automatic way to do that, I think would help to facilitate being able to travel to Korea and being able to live a life there where you can explore the culture more deeply, establish a connection with it, and facilitate those birth family searches as well. So I
Yeah.
think those are
Yeah.
the 5 or so major things that I think would really help to address the concerns of these adoptees. If we can't go back in time and fix the lies that put them in situations where they are now,
Can't do that yet.
then these are the things that I would do to make up for that, and in acknowledging truthfully and honestly what happened to Korean adoptees over the last several decades.
Yes. Yeah. I think that I think clear guidance, and I think that goes along with having sort of a government body that is very specifically. I guess there is, reading here, there's like a post-adoption service budget. The Ministry of Health and Welfare, and the National Center for the Rights of the Child, and there is some money there. There has been some effort. There has been some, uh, some things done. I just don't think it's enough yet. And they haven't done enough outreach to make it really, really widely known.
Exactly.
Because you really have to search it out, like this path to citizenship. I think there is a path to citizenship, but it takes a lot of steps. There's a lot of paperwork, which might be unavoidable, right? It might be unavoidable, at all, for any solution. But I think it would be, if it's going to be hard, right? I think the Korean government owes Korean adoptees who end up finding the that they can like call a number. There's like something, go to the Korean consulate in whatever major city, or there's an online resource, and there's a dedicated government office with dedicated staff to walk an adoptee through this process. I mean, I think that would be really, really good. And tie it into the same office that helps them, or maybe it's not the same office, but also have that birth search service,
Mhm.
right? That's free to the adoptee, right? They don't have to pay, um, and it really just really tries to walk them through. And then if they end up coming to Korea, that they have someone that can help them navigate. They don't need to have a friend or a spouse, or um, try to do it all on their own. Or and there are a lot of there are a lot of nonprofits that will help,
Mhm.
but I feel like the government needs to take a hand in this.
Because I'm thinking about it from the perspective of reach, of just how much of an impact they can have. If these volunteer or NGO organizations are able to make a pretty big impact as is status quo, I can
Yeah,
only
and they
imagine
do.
how much greater of an impact and how much more well known their efforts would be if it was centrally funded through the government and the employees that did this work were not volunteers or getting stipends. If they were able to have that as a primary job through good funding, which
Yeah,
it
yeah,
should
yeah.
on the basis of the things that have gone on with adoption, I think it's deserving of that level of funding. Uh, who knows what kind of positive impact that could have?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that they could do. I mean, they put so much effort. I think the government does a lot of effort to like do all this cultural stuff, right? With K-pop and
Yep.
movies and TV shows, and I hate to lean on like celebrity stuff, but like I feel like they could use that, right? I mean, there's an outreach, there's a cultural reach around the world, of these Korean celebrities,
And
and
actually,
I
that
feel
was
like
sort of the model that I was thinking about when it comes to the level of awareness that I'd be hoping for this sort of thing. That I mean, not all Korean adoptees are going to be super passionate or interested in this, but I think the level of access they should have to knowing about this should be about the same level as a K-pop star or K-pop music in general. Just sort of like the level of familiarity and widespread knowledge about this should be at the same level, ideally, as celebrity culture and
Yeah,
other elements of the Korean way of soft power.
totally.
Um,
Because
yeah,
I mean, they've done TV shows in Korea where it's like birth family search TV show stuff. Um, and I just think that they could do more to do it outside of Korea, right? Because the birth family search stuff, it's only if you really look for it, and then it's only shown around Korea, right?
yep,
So, like, I just think that the birth family search is one thing. I think that's something that would get widespread support, right? Um, I think things like help, like money to help adoptees like live and learn in Korea, probably is a little bit of a harder sell. But I think that it would be it would be a good thing, and it would make Korea look, it would bolster their image at least, to offer some sort of like scholarships or programs for Korean adoptees to come and just study, right? So they're not
yeah,
going to take a job, but they can, and they're not going to live in the lap of luxury, but they can, they'll have, student housing, and they can take, as long as they take language classes and things like that, right? And that could go inside with being there for your birth search or whatever, right?
yeah. Actually,
So
something that I'm thinking about as a reference in terms of how I even came up with or agreed with some of these ideas was when I studied abroad in Japan. First of all, it was
yeah,
infinitely cheaper to study abroad in Japan than it was to do another year of college. So that worked out great
that's
for
kind
me.
of crazy. You went
Yeah,
all the
and
way to Japan.
yeah, and part of it was because I submitted an essay into this national scholarship fund called JASO, like Japanese Association for something something or other.
Yeah, so I'll
Um,
look that up.
and basically, it allowed for me to get about $800 a month as a stipend, discounted student housing that was something like $100 a month, and I wasn't living in the lap of luxury, but I was living in a studio apartment. It would probably be worth about $500 to $900 in your average American city, maybe like 1,500 in New York, sort of thing.
Yeah, maybe
But
even
that's
more now.
that's the model that I would think about in terms of doing something that is cost effective and something that's actually going to make some sort of positive impact in adoptees that are coming back. They would need
Yeah.
a stipend. They would need support resources like I guess in my study abroad experience, they were called tutors, which were
Mhm.
native Japanese students who were just interested in forming relationships with like exchange students and then guiding them around by like helping them set up their bank accounts, cell phone accounts,
Yeah.
things like that. And that's the model that I'm thinking about when it comes to guiding adoptees that haven't really experienced Korea to get that start and get that foothold to be able to do their birth family search or to become closer to the culture and get better at the language.
Right. And I know that there are some organizations like Goal and
Yep.
Coroot. There are some organizations that do some of these things, but they're much smaller than they could be, and they're not enough of them, and they're just not known. Like,
Yep.
people don't know about them.
You need to go searching for them.
Yeah. And I've talked about them, like a lot of adoptees will talk about them, but like the reach is just not there. Um and I think if the government, I keep coming back to the government because they have the money and the reach and they have the connections, and they should be able to make this happen. But that JASO organization, was that the Japan America Society of Oregon?
Nope.
No?
It was a Japanese based organization. Now I'm curious. Now I'm going to look.
Well, it's based in Japan.
Yeah. So it
Okay.
is, I found it, or at least I found the website. Uh, it is Japan Student Services Organization. So
Ah.
shout out to them for giving me like $800 a month to just fuck around and engage in international cultural exchange. And I did a lot of that. Shout out to Nomi Holdai. Have you? So I didn't really drink much when I went to Korea. Did you? Did you drink at all when you were
Oh,
over there?
yeah.
Do they have all you can drink over there? Like you pay a flat fee, and then like for an hour or two, you can just drink as much as you possibly can.
I can't remember, so maybe.
Okay. But that shit is great,
Not
though.
that I
mean,
remember that they do
you can
that.
really only have that in a society that has great public transportation. Thank God. But, otherwise, like, you can't have that in the United States. It'd be an absolute mess. But I think everyone should experience that nonetheless if they are a responsible drinker.
They have they have bottomless stuff like that in America.
I must be going to the wrong places then.
They
I haven't
definitely
seen
have
here.
it in New York City, because you'll have like bottomless mimosas for brunch, and they're not doing it at night either. It's like Sunday brunch. So like,
Wow. Man, I'm jealous.
starts at 11. So they definitely do that, but I don't remember if like Korea had something like that. Drinks are generally cheap anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I do have to admit, man, it is so much cheaper to drink in Asia than it is in the United States.
So much cheaper. And food is generally cheaper too.
Yeah. Shoot.
But yeah, so Coroot was cool. I went to Coroot. I didn't stay there, but some people I met were staying there, and
Yeah,
it's sort of like far-ish away from like the center of Seoul.
it absolutely is, because I'll tell you what, the first time I went back to Korea, no, second time I went back to Korea, I was able to stay at Coroot, but I realized it was fucking far away from any station as it was, and on top of that, the nearest station was kind of an outlier from like any of the places I actually wanted to be. So I ended up only staying there a couple days because it was just too far away from anywhere I wanted to be. Great place, great conversations, but not the most exciting location, because it's really close to the Royal Palace and a bunch of other historical stuff, but none of like the night markets and things like that.
I'm trying to this map here. So, okay, I'm not going to use that. So we're going to go here. Block it. So we're going to do Coroot. I have to put in the address. Anyway, it's far.
Yeah, it is far though. So, I mean, keep that in mind if talking about this has made it sound appealing at all.
It is. I mean, it's very cheap or free, right?
It's very cheap.
Very cheap, right?
It was something to the effect of like $35 a night. So it's definitely partially funded by charitable donations.
Yeah.
And that's definitely helpful for any of the adoptees coming from overseas, for sure.
Yeah. So it's definitely somewhere. Yeah. It should be on your list of places to stay if like you really can't stay sort of closer to sort of the action of Seoul. And let's say you don't particularly care to party or whatever, right? And you just want to sort of have a place to sleep, and you're doing a lot of more serious things. Then I think it's a good place to stay. Like, it's cheap, it's comfortable.
Actually, just
nice
one crazy thing. I don't know if this is a flex or if I'm just excited to say it, but actually, when I was there, just coincidentally, Eddie Wong was doing a Wong's World special at Coroot the day that I happened to be there.
No way. He did one?
Yeah. He did one in Korea, and then he spent about a good 15-20 minutes on Korean adoption, and he spent about 10 minutes at Coroot, or at least 10 minutes of footage at Coroot. And I was there. I'm in that episode. So if you look up that Wong's World episode, I'm fucking in that shit.
Wow. I can't. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, so it was a cool experience on top of everything else that goes along with that on a sentimental level. It was just a pure coincidence. And I was kind of starstruck.
But hey, I mean, especially you didn't expect to see him there.
No, exactly.
But I guess the Japanese
the guy that owns it.
They do it in LA, or they do it out in California. They do the 2-hour.
Oh shoot! Yeah, I need to go out to Torrance or Gardena then.
And serve yourself beer. All right. Wow. Okay.
Nice.
But But yeah, I mean, the Coroot people were nice. I tell a funny story because I was there for like, I don't know if it was like Thanksgiving they were doing like a Thanksgiving dinner, and I had never seen in America they don't have this. Like I don't even think they have it now, but or at
Mhm.
least where I grew up in America, they didn't have um those electric fly swatters.
No, yeah. Kind of like
And
the
I never,
tennis rackets that zap.
yeah, I had never seen one before. And the dumb idiot I am, I shocked myself with it. And it was not like just like a little jolt. It was pretty strong.
Yeah, that shit'll
And it
make
may be
your like
because it
hand
was like,
stuck to it sort of shock.
yeah, and maybe it was just it felt stronger, or my memory of it is that it was more intense just because it was so shocking, or that
Damn.
I was so surprised about it, and then like it was so embarrassing because I was just it was like all the people around and I like shocked myself. So
Well, I mean, I feel like the only reason why I got so much exposure to those was because my wife's family. I feel like every member of her family has one, so I
oh
got
yeah,
used to
I'd
being
never
exposed
seen
to
one,
it.
never ever. But this was probably like back in like 2007 or something.
Yeah.
So I hadn't even really started hanging out with too many like Asian people. So like it was totally. But yeah, I remember. So I remember the pastor in Huang's World cooked a hilariously bad dinner. Can't believe you were on it.
You know what? Like, I remember him saying on the show, like, "Oh, I did a really bad job," but it was actually pretty good. He cooked some pork belly, and it
There you
wasn't
go.
as crispy as I would like it, but
Yeah.
I remember it being pretty good. I think he was just being modest there, so
Hmm.
I can confirm it.
Yeah. I don't know whether he's known to be a bad cook or a good cook. But yeah, it's very homey there. It's not like
Yeah,
it's
it
almost like an
definitely
old
doesn't
school
feel like
boarding
a
house type of feel.
hotel.
Yeah, it's not a
It's
hotel.
definitely like a guy's house sort of feel to it.
Yeah, it's like a boarding house.
Yep.
Which I think is actually pretty home. That can make you feel better, right? I
It
think
makes you feel
coming
more
into
like family.
yeah, and like if you're coming to Korea for the first time and you don't know nobody, and um, that can actually be good, right? It's not as sterile as like staying in a hotel or something like that. But Coroot is one of like they've been around for a long time. Like I said, 2003.
Yeah, 2003.
They do really good work.
That's endorsements from both of us.
Yeah.
So for anyone that's interested, we say
um. Yeah. So we'll give you an update on this investigation. And I really hope they do a deep and honest evaluation.
yeah, I hope so too. I hope it's not going to be like the 9/11 commission.
Yeah. Or like in the Netherlands where they're like, "Oh yeah, this is really bad. We're going to stop doing adoptions." And then like a year and a half, 2 years later, they're like, "Just kidding. We've
Let's
started
flip the
again.
switch
But
back on.
this time that we promise we're going to do better." So it's we'll see. I mean, Korea has really lowered, the number of adoptions has gone way down, but I was just surprised to know that it still happens.
Yeah,
Um,
I guess what's kind of strange is that it's gone down a lot, which is good. But if there's like 12 to 20 kids being adopted each year, what is special about the circumstances, those 12 to 20, rather than having it just at zero if you're going to have so few? In
yeah,
comparison to like say 1990 where there were around like 5,000, it's gone down by orders of magnitude. So it's very
right.
interesting to see now that while it's still going on, that it's just very few.
And what's interesting here in this article from the AP, it says the commission, I just mentioned that Dutch investigation,
Oh
that it
yeah.
also took into account a 2021 investigation by the Dutch government on forced adoptions to the Netherlands, which then concluded that adoptions from South Korea and other origin states involved major human rights infringements of children and their parents. So that's good. That at least makes it seem like they're taking it a bit seriously. It looks like adoptees are also calling for a full opening of their records. That's I didn't know that before.
Yeah, and
which I
actually,
hope
now
they
that I
get.
see
I
that,
really hope they get this. I mean,
yeah,
this means so much. Just even if you find out that everything that you knew was a lie, it's better to know.
yeah, or at least have the opportunity to, rather than not having that chance at all because the government won't open it up.
Right. Right. Um. So yeah, and just this is not the first time that HALT, KSS, Eastern Welfare Society, right? ESW, which is the
Hmm.
other big one, um, have been accused of this and had findings that basically say, yeah, these accusations have a lot of truth in them. But they continue to let them operate, right? They
Yeah,
continue to let them, you know, work with children and families. And I'm like, what is it going to take for them to be like, look, we're just not your accreditation, or we're not going to allow you to do this anymore. Um, we're going to take control of this. I don't know what it's going to take, because I don't think it's going to stop, right? Like, the cat's out of the bag.
yep,
And I think I've said this before, but like, I don't think, taken in a vacuum, there's anything particular. There's no reason why adoptions can't happen, right? And even happen across nations. Though I think that isn't necessary, shouldn't be necessary.
shouldn't.
But adoption as an institution or a system, as an idea and a need, I can see that there is a need, right? Like, at some point, maybe that there's no other choice.
Hmm.
But we're not doing it in a way that protects children at all. And we really need to think long and hard about how these things are structured. And But I don't know whether that's going to happen, because people are going to say, well, if you take too long to make these changes, and so, like with the Netherlands, right? They paused the adoptions. People are going to say, well, how long are you going to stop them? Children are being hurt.
Yeah, children are waiting. These
Children are
parents are
waiting.
waiting. We want our kids now.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, pigs.
And that we're young, so I like that.
I like being called a young because
Yeah.
usually I'm not, and I think I'm actually younger, but it's all good. I mean, I like that sort of praise.
So, like, if you pause it, there's going to be instant pressure. Like, when are you going to open it up? The fact that you're pausing it, you're not letting these adoptions happen, like what was leveled against China, right? Is that you've stopped this, and you're hurting the children. The children are hurt. You hate the children because you're not allowing these adoptions to happen. And in some sense, I could say, well, maybe they have a little bit of a point if some of the children, maybe they're kept in, like, care, in like foster care, or they're in group homes longer than they have to be, right? Because no one wants that, right? Like, if you're going to remove the child, and the child is not going to be given back to the birth family or parent or other birth relatives, then you don't want them just sitting in a group home, right? Or in foster care forever. You'd want them in a more permanent situation.
Sure.
But are we going to we have to weigh that against whether they should have been removed in the first place, and
Yep.
what the best interest is of the child, and that concept of best interest for the child, right? And I think the default right now is get them out of there and into a quote unquote good family as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
And we don't examine enough, like, who's being deemed an acceptable or good family, right? Why were the children removed in the first place? Like, because that story the story I told you, like, I think last stream, about like that mother who dropped her kid off because he was being a brat and said walk home like the
Oh
half
yeah,
mile,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
And she almost had her kids taken away, right? Like, so we don't do enough of that examination, right? Because we fear that, like, oh, we're not going to take children when they should be, and like children will be murdered. And there's not any evidence that has actually improved children's lives, because
Absolutely.
you look at the statistics on how many children who are who have ever been in foster care and adoptees, right, have so much higher incidences of substance abuse and uh suicide and all this stuff, being homeless, right, all these really awful outcomes. And they're higher, not just of like, and I think they're higher across all like all like socioeconomics
That's what I was
buckets,
about to say too.
right?
Normalizing income and economic status, you're still going to get these worse outcomes when children
Right.
are displaced.
They could have been kept in their poor homes, and they would have had
Yeah.
a much better. They have much lower chances and incidences of these of substance abuse, suicide, becoming homeless,
Yeah.
than being removed and being placed almost always in, maybe not in rich homes, but in better financial situations, right?
Yep.
So it's like the process and the system we've built to quote unquote protect children and to give them a better chance, right, for their best interest, is actively harming them, and is
Hmm.
multiple times worse than just keeping them where they were. Because if you were to believe, the advocates for these systems, children are being beaten to death everywhere. And not that that doesn't happen, but they're taking, it's not like an epidemic.
Yep.
And I think if you like look at if you normalize for like how rich people are, I don't think instances of like, I think there is an elevated instance of maybe like child abuse and such in poor families, but I think it's chalked up to the fact that they're poor, not because there's fundamentally anything like awful or bad with them as people,
Yep.
right? So I guess the point I make a lot is that, like, we should be helping people, giving them money so they can, they're not in poverty, right? And uplifting them and like raising the floor that's the acceptable floor of like living standards, than just removing children from families, right? But we can't seem to do that. We just want to take children.
That seems to be the default, and it seems like the cruelty of doing that and the emotional damage that it causes is kind of the point, to punish people for not being of a class or of a culture that is something that we aspire to. So
Yeah. Yeah, and thanks. Yeah, that story was dope. I mean, he's pretty cool. Anyway. Sorry for all the ads on this thing. I mean, like this the apnews.com website is just freaking 50% ads. Like, just Jesus Christ.
speaking of ads, I mean, I feel like if I zoom out a little bit, or I trace the cord back to the wall here, I mean, adoption in and of itself is not an inherently harmful practice or an exploitative practice, but
Exploitative. Yeah.
the way that it is now certainly has those outcomes. And if I try and look deep within myself to find a reason for that, I think that it's the result of us living in a very capitalistic society, and the
Yeah.
models that inform how adoption is carried out is based on the culture that comes downstream from being in a capitalist system. I mean, it, I feel like if things were done in a more socialist manner, in which we're actually caring first and foremost about the well-being of these children, then I still think adoption would be possible in that world in some sort of moral way. But I think there would be more
Yeah.
consistency between the rhetoric of child safety and emotional well-being and the sorts of practices that would be done in terms of like making sure that the parents that they're being taken away from are actually harmful and
Right.
can't be rehabilitated in some way, and that
Right.
the homes that they're being placed in are rigorously tested and made sure that they are not going to be any more abusive or any more violent or any more harmful to the children than the parents that we're taking them away from. And
Right.
I think the gap that we see between the intentions and the ideal situation that adoption would result in versus the reality is a similar gap between rhetoric about the principles and values that America is all about and the sorts of things we see in our foreign policy. I think people are just used to a
Or our
certain level of
domestic
dissonance.
policy.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, shit. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's just reflective of the amount of dissonance that we are tolerating because that's just what we're used to.
Yeah.
And, I really do think that having something as sensitive as displacing children and putting them in someone else's home should have a little bit more human soul or concern for humanity put into it than capitalist models will really allow. And I feel like, again, ideally in my own sort of perfect world, there would be no need for adoption because we just give families that need money and support the money and support they need. But it certainly doesn't help that the capitalist model informs how adoption has been carried out through all this time up until now. So that's
Yeah.
going to be what I end up shaming and blaming. Aside from the bad actors that are directly involved, is just the mental models that are used to make the institution what it is now. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Because, you know, uh, villages and towns and societies and communities have taken care of children since time immemorial,
yeah,
right? And they didn't do it in the same legal structures or in the same legal ways, right? That that we've built in modern society. Um, and children were raised more communally. They
hmm
they still sort of had their nuclear families probably, or like they had some sort of idea of like your, you know, like blood family unit. But if tragedy were to strike, and a lot of these things happen more frequently, right? Way back when.
I'm just thinking about like how often kids would die at like age
Yeah, or
1 or 2.
parents, right? Or parents with, you go hunting and there was an accident,
No,
or they're
exactly.
traveling and
That
like people get injured, or like, you get sick and and someone dies, and
that's
so
the one
like
thing I always put into context is like it's very easy to be an atheist or be secular in times like this when we have so much infrastructure and so many systems to make
true.
sure that we don't just randomly die. But shit, I mean, before all that stuff, no wonder people believed in God because anything really could happen,
Yeah,
and it really
yeah,
was a God willing sort of thing every single
totally,
day. And
totally.
people don't think about that now. And I'm always thinking about that shit because I'm just like, man, if I'm neurotic now, if I have anxiety now, I can only imagine how much worse it would have been
Yeah,
without the medications and without all the doctors and shit like that I have access to now. So that's why
yeah,
I find
absolutely,
all kinds of reasons to be thankful.
absolutely. Yeah, but like communities raise children. Yeah, I think obviously there were differences among some cultures of like how children that were basically orphaned or not were treated, but cultures figured this stuff out, right? And they didn't necessarily have to have this formal sort of system. And I know obviously that we don't live in that time now, and there are legal structures that sort of been in place, are in place now. But even within that time frame, right, of the last few decades or more, right, maybe 50, 60 years, the way things are now, they weren't always that way, right? And things can change, and there are mechanisms in place for the laws and these systems and institutions and things to change. So like we do have the power to change them, right? Like this isn't some sort of hopeless like hope or wish that I have, right? And there are a lot of people doing really great work. Like I think this group doing, this the Danish group with the Korean government, the adoptee rights campaign, adoptee rights law. They're doing a lot of great work for domestic adoptees in America to get access to the original birth certificates, right? So they're changing law and getting legislation passed for that. And they're going state by state with this because that's how our system works.
Yeah.
You literally got to go state by state because your birth certificate is given to you by your state, not the U.S. government, not the federal government. So and the laws are different everywhere. So you've got to go state by state and do this, and they're putting in the work, and like that's what it takes. And but it can be done. It can be done. So like all these things, I feel it can be done. So Tina's saying, I shared this with Adam before. He read this first year of law school. A Marxist prof showed it to us. I assume he's going to have a second comment.
Yeah, because I was going to say, where is it? What is it?
I can't remember what he's going to share, but hopefully he'll. Just how ridiculous law and economics approach had become.
Shoot, I'm interested.
Maybe it was like adoption law, or maybe it was like immigration law or something. But while we wait for Teen to type his comment here, which I feel bad I don't remember exactly the example because I'm sure he shared it with me a couple of times. Yes. The regulation of the market and adoptions. Yeah.
Oh, just the title.
Yeah, just the title alone. Yeah, no. And I've been meaning to try to read that book or read a synopsis or
Shit, I mean, seeing that title made me instantly curious what it's all about.
But yeah, I mean, just the fact that we're talking about the regulation of the market and adoptions. Market and adoptions.
I don't know, anything that mentions the market as like this abstract concept that needs to be respected, I know it's going to be bad and I won't like it.
I think this book in particular, though, is more of just a sober analysis of the reality of this market.
Okay.
Not like a
okay, so it was an actual
not that I know of as like a supporting one or the other. Just basically, this is what the reality is.
See, my mind's been poisoned by economists like Noah Smith, or
he's not an economist. Fuck that guy. I mean,
and fucking wonks like Matty Iglesias.
Fuck that guy too. I mean, I don't know who let him out of his basement or like got him like a freaking internet connection, but yeah, I mean, these things can be changed, right? Like we don't just have to sit here. So the idea is that free market dynamics are best at addressing the baby shortage in America versus the baby. Oh, it was. Okay. So this was sort of, this is a good thing. Versus the baby surplus in poor countries. Yeah. I agree. It's all fucked up.
It's fucked up.
That's all fucked up. That's an air horn for that comment, not for the not for the market dynamics in adoption. But that's basically what I mean. This is it.
Yep. This is the crux of how it operates. This is the mental model that informs people's.
You've also got to think about. You've got to think about baby shortage.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? What do they mean by baby shortage? Because there really isn't a shortage of like available children, right? Like the foster system has a lot of people, lots and lots of children in it. But there might even be a shortage, even if you factor that in, because there's such a demand for just infants, right?
Yep.
Like infant children. And
blank slates.
yeah. And even if you were to get all of like the largely white Americans who want to adopt just all of the children in foster care, which I don't want them to, because
No.
foster care is not just a temporary bullpen for adoptable children. But even if you were to do that, that probably wouldn't meet the demand, right? There's just such a demand for it. It's kind of crazy. And then just the baby surplus, like, oh yeah, they don't instead of like trying to figure out a way to like help more people in America have children if they want to have children, and all that stuff. No, we're just it's cheaper for us to just or there's a market and money to be made.
Yep. We can be the middlemen.
Right. And we're helping them. We're helping that poor country out because they're poor. They have a surplus of children they can't take care of.
We're doing them a favor.
We're going to take the kids, and
so there'll be less of a burden. Yep.
Yeah, it's all fucked up.
Yep.
But I'm really, I really admire this Peter Mueller guy. I think, just. I think the Korea Times did a interview with him. He's 48, and he was just dicked around by Halt.
Yeah.
They were like, oh, we don't know, and then they're like, oh no, they're alive. So no, they're like, they told him that he was born in Seoul, but then in subsequent they were told that his biological mother gave birth to him in Nansan, South Chungcheong province. So like that's not anywhere near Seoul, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then but she happened to be he was born on that day, which happened to be the same day she brought him to the adoption agency in Seoul. So he's like, how is this possible? What is the possibility that the woman who just gave birth to a child could travel across the country to give away the infant?
And they must have given him such a stock customer service like response to, tell him those inconsistencies and say it with a straight face without questioning those results themselves. So,
yeah, I mean, that had to be what they were doing. So this, I'm going to share. Present. I can't. Okay, share this tab instead. So this is where they said he was born.
Yep.
Here in this, that's, I don't know if you can see this, but it's in red.
Yep, can see it.
And this is where Seoul is, up here. All the way up here.
It's got to be a couple 100 miles.
So if you were going to go to Seoul, it takes, by train, it takes 2 hours and 7 minutes. But they didn't have that train back in 1974, I don't think. So how'd you get there? Like when was this line? When was the KTX line?
Exactly.
Built? KTX.
It was definitely after 1988. Shit.
KTX Train Express. Yeah. So the KTX was construction began in 1992, but it wasn't launched in 2004.
Wow.
So the KTX train was not there. And then if she wants to take, like, I guess the regular bus, like a bus,
yeah,
it would take almost 2.5 hours. But so she had just given birth and she decided she's going to go all the way to Seoul.
Yeah, drop that baby off.
Um, and who knows if this bus service was running back then? I don't know. Um, so he called shenanigans on them.
Makes sense.
So yeah, I mean, it's just kind of crazy. The KSS, right, Korean Social Services, has admitted to the fabrication of documents in some cases, he said, showing a letter sent by the agency to a Danish adoptee, which stated, in fact, the adoption file, was made up just for the adoption procedures.
Whoops.
Here it is. In fact, like, here it is.
Yep.
That's crazy. According to the record, you were born on April 20th, 1975. But you just said that it was made up. And this is such this story. It's like you were born to an unmarried couple, and it just didn't seem to go well. So yeah.
So that's how you ended up here.
And eventually, your birth mother left home and just left like a Dear John letter. Not Dear John. That's not wrong. But left a letter saying like, I'm not going to see her again. So she abandoned the family, and then the birth father gave up the kid for adoption. Not that couldn't happen. I am pretty sure that had probably happened at some point to somebody, right? Like legitimately.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could certainly happen. But it's like it's such a common story, or some variation.
At least half.
Or some variation, that it's like they just made it up from a template and like change around some details. It's like the, it's like those fridge magnets with different words and letters, and you just make up a story, and you could just like rearrange it.
You just rearrange them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to do that on like a cover letter for a job application, but we're talking about paperwork for kids that are being placed in new homes overseas. That's crazy to me.
Insane.
But yeah, I mean, these are the things that happened that aren't really covered when it comes to the classical sort of narrative around your typical adoption. I mean, while these things may be typical, they aren't really talked about at all. So it's up to people like us to say, yo, that typical narrative, that's bullshit. This is the real shit that's been going on all along.
Yeah. And like these agencies are just refusing to give information, citing privacy issues.
For who?
And this is a issue that reason is given for a myriad of like when adoptees ask questions about things, or make very reasonable requests for like information or access to things. So like I mentioned the birth certificate stuff. Like that privacy issue is trotted out all the time, and it's bullshit. This is our information about us. We have a right to know where we come from, right? Like who our parents are. And for, that's not seen as a privacy issue when it's just a, non-adopted person seeing their birth certificate, right? But when it comes to an adoptee who is sort of given away, or somehow was exchanged, right? It's seen as like, oh, it's a privacy issue. Like the original, the first family, they don't want to be known. I'm like, well, you know what? I need to know so that like I can get my medical records potentially. And they drum up and they create this like boogeyman adoptee who's going to harass the birth parents for a relationship. And I want to be completely frank here. It's like a lot of adoptees don't want a relationship with you assholes. We just want to know who you are so that we can ask some questions about like, do we have a history of whatever? And maybe some questions of like, very basic, some sort of like, what's our family like, if that. But a lot of adoptees
Yeah.
don't even want to know that. Like, they don't want anything to do with you. They have their own families already, and they don't necessarily want to know. So at the basic level. And even if you did want to know and have a broader relationship, it's completely the prerogative of the birth father or mother or other family members to be like, we don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
And if the adoptee continues to harass you, then you just like that. That's just their normal procedures for that type of thing.
Yeah.
And that can
Leave it
happen
to the
for a
courts.
fucking normal family too, right?
Yeah.
So like, or non-adoptive family. So like that privacy issue thing, dumb.
Yeah.
It's not an actual issue. It's just something. It's the boogeyman of privacy is thrown up to not give us our information that we're entitled to. Like, this is
Yeah.
our information.
The horror movie caricature of the adopted child that is some strange obsessed stalker type.
And internationally, it's even harder. Like, how am I going to harass somebody?
No, exactly.
Facebook messages. You can just block someone.
Yeah, am I going to look that up on Naver?
Like letters to your address. Like, I don't know. Like,
no, exactly.
So like the government needs to. I think the government needs to just take a stand and say, look, you've got to order them to give the full access. These are our documents. So
I like the line where he says, "And if Holt is offended by this, they're welcome to sue me. I'm ready
does
for it."
he say that, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That is why we had delivered a letter to the presidential office to take care of this. We've asked them to protect our documents. Oh yeah. So then the other request is to make sure is a request for the government to make sure that these agencies don't destroy the documents, right?
Yeah.
That is why. So Peter said, that is why we have delivered a letter to the presidential office to take care of this. We've asked them to protect our documents, he said. And if Holt is offended by this, they are welcome to sue me. I am ready for it. I love that. Yeah. Like, that's like, because fuck you.
I know my
I'm
rights.
owed give me what I'm owed.
Exactly.
What's mine. And if you don't like it, then sue me and I'll fight you in court.
Yeah.
But if these allegations are proven to be true, the agency should be punished according to Korean law. Absolutely.
Yep.
And the government is to blame too. I mean, look, it had to go through the government. It's not like the agencies were completely in control.
No, exactly.
They were in control of things because they could they were given a lot of legal rights by the government and they would just lie and everything, but it still had to be processed by the government. So the government allowed the lie to happen, right? Yep. We think that there were indications that the government was trying to solve some of the social problems, such as poverty with international adoption, and the authorities had hired the agencies to do the dirty work while willingly stamped falsified passports and travel documents, he said. Obtaining passports was a complicated process back in the 1970s, but the papers came in so easily, Mueller viewed, speculating that the documents could have been prefabricated. So this is a little older interview because before they said they were going to accept some of these applications. And the language barrier, right? So that's another big issue that we're asking for the government to provide these resources, right? Because we need bilingual people. And I also think the receiving countries should set up a dedicated government, for the US, it would probably be State Department office for this. And also have government workers who are bilingual for each of the, sending countries to help facilitate this, right? Because even if the Korean government were to set up an office, right, it would be hard. It's harder to then go directly and to try to work with a foreign government, right, or a foreign government agency. it would be easier if there were a native government agency that would help facilitate the relationship with the foreign government agency, right? So not to just pick on Korea, and Korea has to do all these things. I think America needs to do it as well.
It'd be nice.
And I assume Peter, as an attorney, has I mean, he's probably not rich, but he's middle class at least. Whatever
Sure.
passes is that in Denmark. But there are plenty of adoptees who don't have, the money to even think of, even if they wanted to try to do a birth search.
Yep.
They can't afford to go to Korea. I mean, plane ticket to Korea, it might not seem that expensive, but it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And it takes time, right? Not everyone works at a job where they can get paid time off for like rail workers.
Yeah. It's a month
you
or
know.
two's worth of income for a lot of families and individuals.
Yeah. And just, you got to be there for a week at least or more.
Shit, I'd say the bare minimum would be 2 weeks. Absolute bare minimum.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of like the smallest amount of time that maybe you could try to do something.
Yeah.
Maybe so I'm like a week maybe. And a lot of people don't get vacation, paid time off, right? Like this is a very time intensive and money expensive.
That's why the
thing.
Europeans are doing it and not Americans.
Yeah.
They don't have any of those rights.
Yeah, probably. Because I remember when I was in Korea, like, because I lived in Korea. I think I've mentioned this, but I lived in Korea for like 7-8 months back in 2009, 2010, because I had been laid off and I had some money, but I needed to get a job. So I also worked in Korea as well. But I remember I stayed in this. Goal also does these apartments, but it's like in the Seoul city proper, right? Like sort of, it's in Iwa, which is near Hongdae.
Okay. Yep.
And so they're cheap, but not nearly as cheap as Coroot is. And one of the guys that was living there, because they have like a men's only like apartment built, like big apartment, like a woman's only. I think then they also have like some other ones. But I was living in like the men's dormitory.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that was there, I forget where he was from. He was either from Denmark or the Netherlands, one of the Scandinavian countries. Maybe he was Swedish.
Okay.
But the Swedish government was basically paying him to like go study Korean there.
Yeah. Shit's different over there, man.
Yeah, and like he was just renting his house out, or like maybe like he didn't even have to sell his house, and like
wow.
Yeah, like he was a fun guy. But like yeah, so like he was there on the government dime, like just learning Korean.
I can't even imagine that as an
American. Obviously they weren't giving him that much money because he was staying in this like men's bachelor pad dormitory.
Sure.
But he didn't have to pay for the classes or anything. Like
it's something.
Yeah. So just something, right? Like it was just, and it wasn't anything special for adoptees. Like it wasn't like an adoptee specific language program, I don't think. But and he wasn't what we would think of in America as like university age. Like, so he wasn't like 19 or 20 or even like 21 or 22. Like he was what we would, he was like out of college.
Okay. Yeah.
But he had decided he was going to do this. And it totally was possible. And there are tons and tons of Japanese students that go to Korea to learn, study Korean.
Yeah.
They find it easy.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Just burping. But yeah, I mean, this is a developing story. I'm really proud of this group of adoptees and really, just really putting pressure, asking for the right things.
It's a lot of
in
work.
my opinion.
Very arduous stuff.
Yeah. Takes a lot of time, and you know, and I like the fact that like it's getting attention from all these different, like this is in New York One, like this article, right? Like, The Guardian, you know, has an article on it, right? Right, because it's like the update article. The AP, right? It's probably like the AP article that's being sent around, but it's being picked up, right? I think it's being reported on, and that's really important. All right, man.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to chat about?
Well, I guess one last thing, something that's not super serious, but something that I
Yeah.
thought was kind of amusing, is maybe we'll do something that's a repeated segment on here. I
Sure.
wanted to talk a little bit about Asian America's sweetheart, who is Jack Jack. Do you know Jack Jack?
Yeah, on Twitter.
Jane New
Yeah.
and 10. She's always talking about bargains. And I was asking her about bargains. Like, what's your bargain of the week? And she said that apparently
You
at
gonna share?
Macy's,
You
there are
should chat.
Mickey Mouse shirts on clearance for $4 each. And there are
Mickey
also
Mouse.
drinks at 99 Ranch on sale, multi-packs. They used to be $6, and now they're $4. So those are
There you go.
Jack Jack's deals of the week. Discount Mickey Mouse shirts at Macy's and discounted multi-packs of drinks at 99 Ranch. Shout out to them. So
What kind of drinks?
she didn't specify. I guess it's multiple brands, multiple varieties.
All right,
But check out your local 99 Ranch.
99 Ranch. Okay,
Yeah.
so they have a website. All right, so drinks, right? They got a lot of deals.
They do.
Drinks, beverages. Oh yeah, what did you say it was?
No, she didn't say any specific ones. She just said many different drinks.
Yeah, so they do. So I'm going to share that. You get the lemon tea. This lemon tea is actually really good. You get a 6-pack for $5.
I'll have to give it a try.
The probiotic like yogurt drinks.
Oh yeah.
You get 1 pack for $1. That's actually
Dang,
not
I
bad.
drink all 5 of those in one sitting.
Yeah, right. A 50-cent discount. I mean, that's pretty big. Those are the only ones that seems to be on sale. All right, let's go. Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I wasn't too impressed with the drinks as much as I was the $4 shirts at Macy's. So
Macy's, Mickey Mouse. Oh yeah, Mickey Mouse shirt.
Yeah, apparently at our local locations, they are $4 each.
$4?
Yeah.
No. I don't know where she's getting them.
That's a good find. It might be in store only.
In store only.
She's really good at finding bargains. She's talking about bargains
and in this day and
day.
age,
exactly. She's always
with
talking
inflation
about
the way it is.
Yeah. No. That's why she's Asian America's sweetheart. Shout out to Jack Jack, aka Jane New and 10. So I think that'll just be a recurring thing on the show, is just shouting out Jack Jack, finding out the deals of the week. So lots of love to her.
Yeah, no, she is Asian America's sweetheart.
Yep.
And then the last thing I'll ask, because I think I just find it amusing how much my wife worries that I'm actually going to do this. But
yeah,
I've been searching for a car for a while because I just want to get a new car. Nothing wrong with my current car, but for some reason I've had this itch. But the market's
I know what
awful.
you mean.
And so the car I've fixated on recently is the Kia Stinger.
The Stinger.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that, but
and my wife is like,
oh wow.
She's like, you cannot buy that car. That's a midlife crisis car. Now, so the question to the 6 people watching, or anyone else who watches this on replay is that, is the Stinger a midlife crisis car? Aside from this very astute fact, yes, the prices will drop. But 2023 is the last year for the Stinger. So
Oh,
when they
okay.
discontinue a year, even if it's not a particularly they discontinue a model, but Teen says yes, it is. Is that the prices will drop, or it's a midlife crisis car? I suspect that this is yes, it's a midlife crisis car, because Teen's always busting my balls.
You know what? I'll bust your balls too, even if he's referring to the availability thing. Because
Yes.
I'm looking at it right now for the first time,
Yeah.
and it definitely has the vibe of like a Kia Dodge Challenger.
Yes,
So
it's
it
kind
does
of in
very
that
much feel
vein.
like a midlife crisis car. It is sort of like your 2023 Mustang sort of feel to it.
All right, all right. And
I
then
mean,
the
not that
other,
there's anything wrong with that. I mean,
there
from
is,
my
because if
perspective,
I
at least.
there there is something wrong with it, because my wife will not let me buy it. So I got to find a car that she's going to be happy enough, but I'll be happy enough to buy
But
as
I
well.
feel like if it doesn't have that midlife crisis energy to it, will it be that exciting to you at all? I mean,
Well,
that's not informing your choice,
the
but
other car I do really like, because I don't want to get an SUV. It's similar to this. So so instead of the Mercedes, I'm thinking of the A4 Allroad, so Audi. Um, so a
hey,
station
that's
wagon.
definitely not a midlife crisis car.
Well, if I got the AMG one, it would be, because the AMG one has, like, I don't know, crazy horsepower. So it's one of those, like, sleeper ones where it's like
That's
it's a
definitely a
station
sleeper because
wagon.
I'm looking at the AMG right now, and I wouldn't suspect it has a super powerful engine
Yeah,
with the
so
way that it looks.
the AMG E63 wagon has 603 horsepower.
Oh, that's insane,
Yeah, 600 horsepower.
man.
Uh
So,
like new, it is way out of my price range, because new, it starts at 122,000,
damn. Okay.
$150. But I could get a used one. So this is about the Stinger, right? This is what a Korean David Wooderson would drive. Who's David Wooderson? I don't even know who that is. Oh, from Dazed and Confused. Yeah. Played by McConaughey. Yeah. Uh,
Yep,
yes,
I
that's
can picture
probably
it.
yeah. But surprisingly, if you go on YouTube and you're looking at, like, the Stinger owners, or the people who like to have these channels,
Yeah.
it's Korean guys. I think
Hmm.
it's Korean guys, and it's a lot of black guys.
Huh. I mean, I knew black guys like Nissans, but I didn't realize that Kias were popular too.
Yeah, so I guess so, and I guess with my facial hair it wouldn't help either. Okay. I guess I really have to, like, wait until, like, I'm truly, like, out of midlife to get it. But then by then,
To avoid the stigma, at least.
all right. So I guess I'll just have to get, like, a station wagon, but, you know, the AMG, or not maybe not the AMG version, but, like, Mercedes has other station wagons.
I just think it's funny that that one has like 600 horsepower when the last car that I owned was a Chevy Spark. Do you know how many horsepower that has?
100.
Under 100.
95.
94.
Oh my gosh.
It didn't even get that great gas mileage either. It was only getting
Holy
like
crap.
average of like 28.
Uh, but, like, so the regular E-Class, not the AMG version, so the E450 4MATIC all-terrain wagon, out of my price range, but a more reasonable 362 horsepower.
Yeah, yeah,
More reasonable.
yeah, more reasonable, definitely.
Um, but the horsepower numbers have fucking shot up on these cars, man. It's insane. Um, but
Yeah, it
yeah.
must be to compete with those giant ass pickup trucks that everyone's buying.
Maybe. But yeah, I might still get the Stinger. I get the E350 wagon. I don't think they make the 350 anymore. At least according to what I'm seeing on the Mercedes USA website, they only have the 450. So the 350 would have to get used, which I'm kind of coming around on the idea of a used car, especially if it seems lightly used. Because I was seeing, yeah. So anyway, I won't bore people with my car talk. But my wife never really gets angry at me, but as soon as I start talking about cars, she gets very upset with me. So,
Well, I mean, that Kia Stinger definitely is kind of midlife crisis, Kyle.
come on.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, certified used, they're always a little bit more expensive, but yeah, they do have that warranty, so that helps. No, I just think that it's more like, the market's just really inflated still. I'm hoping the increased interest, so when the interest rates are so high, the price of the cars will have to start coming down a bit because they just won't be able to sell them because people won't be able to afford it at these inflated prices.
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll at least get it at like MSRP. But my coworker actually just got a 530i BMW and performance package coupe, 2-door coupe. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge BMW fan, but he was very happy about it. Very, very happy. And he got it in like that really sort of like sweet blue color, like that iconic blue Mercedes.
Okay, yeah. I'm
like,
looking right here, and that's some of the first results.
But yeah, but like the grill is just so awful on them. I can't buy it. And they're inflated for what they are.
Yeah, Carvana's gonna fail, but it's okay.
Yeah, but so people are saying, yeah, so Carvana's going to fail, but I don't think that's going to necessarily immediately make the wholesale market drop, because I
don't think so either. But
whoever gets those assets, right, they're just going to trickle them out, and then they're going to know that they're going to just be able they're going to have to just junk a big part of that used car fleet because they won't be able to sell them because they're not going to flood the market and make the prices just tank.
I guess I never thought about that possibility. I was always thinking about like aging inventory they would be concerned about. But if they want to sort of control the price that the market's at, that makes sense.
They'll just write it off somehow. Or they'll just it's a loss, and they'll use it against they'll find some accounting way to make
there's always a way for abandon the car somewhere,
right? They have those car graveyards, right, where just cars go to die. Yeah, I might do something like that. Yeah, I mean, I might do something like that, but I don't know. I don't really need it right now. But like, and with the repos, like, if I'm scared of a used car, just like a regular used car, because you never know what someone's fucking done with it.
Sure.
Repos, that's a whole other animal.
That's a whole other animal.
The people who get their cars actually repossessed by the bank, or whoever, whatever, they've known, they've been not paying for a while, and they've known that they can't do those payments for a while. So do you think they're going to spend any money on oil changes or anything like that?
No, they're not. Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like for every one person that just finds themselves in dire straits because of a job situation, there's like 9 people that like couldn't have afforded it all along, and it was just a matter of time before that car got taken back.
Yeah, so like they're gonna just thrash that car, right? So like I don't necessarily trust a repo.
Yeah, me neither. Shit.
But it would have to be like a screaming deal, right? And yeah, they've been dropping, but like if you look at the graph, right, like the used car price at retail and even at wholesale had gone up so far that we're still near the peak. Like it's like every month for the last year or the last 7 or 8 months, it's gone down 0.5%. this month. And then you look at the actual graph and it's still so high. So there's a long way for it to drop. Another 6-7 months still. So anyway, car search journey continues.
The saga continues.
Yeah. I guess I'm not going to get a Stinger because everyone thinks it's a midlife crisis car. So I'll get it and I'll show you how crisis-y my midlife is. I just want a V6, okay? Is it too much for me to dream to get a V6? Jesus. You know what would be a more midlife crisis car is if I got like a Supra.
Yeah.
That'd be
true.
more midlife crisis.
It would be.
Yeah. I want to see like I want to go on Auto Trader right now and see how much like so okay, so not BMW, Mercedes the E-Class, but the AMG version. E-Class E63 AMG. Here we go. Oh no, they don't have these are all the sedans. I want body style wagon. Here we go. They're still super expensive. Sort by lowest price. 60 grand for 2016. That's it's like on the outer edge.
Wait, how much for 2016?
$59,997 with only 64,000 miles on it. So that's actually really low mileage.
Man.
Yeah, like that's the lowest one.
Wow.
Yeah. But it doesn't, I don't know like how many like, oh, they sold it for a while now. What the lowest price is. Used. What? Okay. Here's a 2014 for 50 grand.
Man, that's still holding its value though.
Well, it was probably over 100 grand when it was new.
Man. I don't know, man. I'm used to driving cheap cars. So
yeah. I could also just get like a Toyota.
whatever.
But the thing is, right? Oh no, yeah, I know all these things. Thank you though. Yeah, if it's over 30 days, you can. Yeah, usually you can, but these places want to manipulate that. So like, they'll take it off and then relist
take it off and put it back on.
So like, if it's like getting close to 30 days, the smart ones at least will take it off and relist it. But yeah, I mean, first world problems. I mean, I can just keep my car. It's fine. Like getting this like turbo V like 8-cylinder like AMG Mercedes wagon, I would get worse mileage than I'm currently getting, and I get bad mileage. Like I'll get even worse. Like so, like part of my motivation is I want to get like better mileage, right?
Sure.
And even if I got the Stinger, like the V6 Stinger, that's still better mileage than what I get.
Wow.
In my like small SUV, but oh man, definitely. But it's a beautiful car. It's such a beautiful car. But whatever. But the Prius, like the RAV4 Prime, right? The plug-in hybrids, like they're still like they'll set you back like 55, 60 grand. Yeah, exactly. I'll just wait for the new Prius. And then I'll see it'll maybe marked up until it's like $50,000. Like the average new car price in America and like went up to like 48 grand.
Oh man, it went past 40? Shit.
Yeah, it's 48 grand. So anyway. All right, everyone. We'll stop boring you with the car talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate everyone listening to our ramblings.
Absolutely.
And next week we'll have a really great topic for you. Yeah, we'll try to come up with these more fun segments like at the end where we do Jack's deals and other things like that. And we really appreciate everyone commenting and just like, subscribe, all that jazz.
Cool.
All right.
Until
Bye,
next
everyone.
time, guys.
Bye now.
Peace.